that this session will be recorded for future purposes. So if everyone is okay, I'll quickly start recording the session so that anyone can have access to this recording if you need it in the future when you are doing your applications. So just wanted to let everyone know that this is a recorded session and hope everyone is okay with that. And having said that, I would kickstart the presentation today. So this is basically going to be about, like I said, we just wanted to have a discussion on the relevant work experience that you have to submit in order to apply for your membership, and also how you can present the work experience gained so far in terms of applying for your membership. So those are the two objectives of this session today. And first of all, I would want to touch a little bit on the eligibility criteria. So the students who have sat for their strategic level case study exam can most certainly apply for the membership. And also students who have completed their strategic level OTQs but is yet to sit for their strategic level case study examination is also eligible to apply for the membership. So those are the two categories of students who would be eligible to apply for the membership. And also the other eligibility criteria is you have to have a minimum of 40 months of relevant work experience. So I'll touch upon the relevant work experience part in my next slides. So yes, we do say that you need to submit 36 months of work experience. So if you go to if you go to the CIMA website, it does say that you need to submit 36 months of work experience. During my presentation, I'll explain why we say that you have to have a minimum of 40 months of relevant work experience in order to apply for the membership. So the fourth point is that once you put your documents together, you need your employer to verify and sign off your work experience. So those are the main eligibility criteria. First one, you have to have completed your strategic level case study exam. Second one is if you're still or if you're yet to sit for your strategic level case study exam, still you'll be eligible to apply for the membership. Third one is you have to have a minimum of 40 months of work experience in order to apply for the membership, and you have to get your work experience signed off by your employer. Then we move on to the relevant work experience. Okay, so let me hold on, just give me a second. All right. Okay, so some of you might already know that we always tell that there is something called relevant work experience in terms of your membership application. Okay, so the relevant practical experience is usually broken down into three categories. All right, experience, we look at things like preparing and maintaining accounting records, IT, desktop skills, system and procedure development, and things like that, right? And when it comes to co-experience, we look at areas such as preparation of management accounts, planning, budgeting, forecasting, product and service costing, project appraisal, project management, and things like that. Okay, and when it comes to supplementary, we require experience in terms of financial, finance, taxation, external relationships, and things like that. I will not focus a lot on this slide because Mr. Tilakavardhana will explain this slide in detail in his briefing and what usually is categorized under basic core and supplementary. So I will not explain in detail about this at the moment, and I will move on to the next slide. So basically, when it comes to, so I touched upon the eligibility criteria, then I touched upon the relevant work experience, which is basic and supplementary. Now I move on to the set of documents that you need to submit, right? So most of you know that we have 4 documents that you need to submit in terms of your
I believe that Surangani has some issues with connectivity. So maybe let's just carry on, or just give her a few minutes to log back in.
Hi, I'm back. I'm so sorry I had a small internet disturbance. I'm so sorry for that. I hope everyone can hear me.
Yes, so we can hear you.
Yeah, okay. So I will quickly share my screen, and this is where we stopped. Okay, so basically I touched on the application form, which will consist of your personal details, your verifications, and your current employment details. And the section 2 is the employment summary, which will give you or give the assessors the total history of your employment from start date to end date or to date. Whatever the designations you have held will be included in the employment summary. So we usually call it a employment history. So when we look at the document, we know what designations you have held so far and the duration and all those details. So don't worry, I'll show you the document also. Then the third section is the detailed experience record, which according to us and according to the assessors is one of the most important documents out of these 4 documents, because this will give you or give us actually the detailed explanation of the work that you have carried out, right? So whatever the work that you have done, the experience that you have gained will be in detail explained under the detailed experience record. So we usually call this one of the most important documents in terms of your membership application, right? And then we move on to the record of skill development. There, basically, we would want you to showcase on 3 skills that you have developed in while you are working or while you are gaining your experience. We will give you 3 skills that we would want you to show us some examples of how you have developed those skills. Okay, so on the screen you might see something called a sequence, and we have kind of change the sequence of this the application form. So why this is we usually tell students to start off with their employment summary. Okay, so like I said, the employment summary will give us a history of your work experience. So if you start off with that, it will give you like a basic structure in order to complete your application form and the detailed experience record. Okay, so be used as a structure or like a guideline in order to complete your application form and the detailed experience record, right? So if you just give me a minute, I will need to the summary looks like, so that I can take you through that also. All right. So this is how an employment summary will look like. I'm sure most of you have seen this already, but for those who have not seen it and seeing this for the first time, I will take you through this. So this is what an employment summary looks like, where we ask you to mention the start date and the end date for each designation that you have held. Okay. And we would want you to mention the total number of months and whether it's part-time and full-time, right? The company, the business sector, and some details about the company, and also your position, who you reported to. So those are the details that we look at in terms of the employment summary. So you can see there is something called the annual turnover. So if your company is not comfortable in divulging that information, you can leave it blank. But usually we advise you to fill all the columns on the employment summary so that we can get a better understanding of the designation you have held and the company that you have worked for, right? So here what you need to do is, like I said, you just need to fill out this document with the designations and the companies that you have worked for on the chronological order, which means from the first designation to the current designation, right? So if you can see, I have given you an example also. So you just have to mention the date, month, and year, so that it's easier for us to calculate the number of months that you have held each designation. Then we need you to give number of months and mention whether it's full-time and part-time, right? And the company, the business sector, and all of that needs to be filled. And then you mention your job title. I have, for an example, I have mentioned here as the finance executive, and who you reported to. I have just mentioned finance manager, okay? Then we move on to the most important area in this document. So we want you to divide the total number of months in each designation into basic, core, and supplementary, right? So like I have done here, we need you to, for an example, let's say that one of you is a finance executive who is working for XYZ company, right? And you have been the finance executive for 30 months, right? So we need you to take that 30 months, right? And then basically figure out how many months should come under basic, how many months should come under core, and how many months should come under supplementary, right? And we would want you to mention it here. This can never be something like this, right? So sometimes students get confused. Okay, how am I going to divide these 30 months into basic, core, and supplementary, right? So if you browse the website, the CIMA website, you'll be able to get your hands on a document which we have usually that breaks down basic, core, and supplementary into further subcategories. Okay, so I'll show you that as that document as well in a little while. So that document usually breaks down the basic, core, and supplementary further into subcategories. So that by reading that document, you'll be able to understand, as a finance executive, if you have 30 months of work experience, how you can break down those 30 months into basic, core, and supplementary, right? So the most important thing that you need to focus here on is that this should, the total number under basic, core, and supplementary should tally this number of months that you have mentioned here, or else it has to be below than that, right? It can never be above 30 months, right? So if you take this example, it comes to 20 months of work experience, right? So when we look at this first designation, we know, okay, you have completed 30 months as a finance executive. Out of the 30 months of work experience that you have gained at XYZ company, your experience that is relevant to the CIMA membership is only 20 months, right? So we get an understanding, yes, you have 30 months, but only 20 months of work experience is relevant, right? So you need to figure out how you're going to divide that. And the document I mentioned earlier will support you in understanding what usually comes under basic, one supplementary. Mr. Tilakavardhana will touch upon this area also in his briefing, just to explain what comes under basic and supplementary. With that, the document I mentioned would support you in getting this employment summary filled, right? So likewise, we would want you to fill out all the details in terms of your work experience that you have gained, right? So let's, for an example, let's say that you have only 3 designations you have held, no problem. You can mention all 3. And let's say that you have about 8 designations you have held so far, and you feel the initial 2, the first 2 designations you have held is not quite relevant in terms of your membership application because it does not come under basic and supplementary. That is all right. You can mention the designation, you can mention the company, all these details you can include, and you can leave this bit blank. Then we know, okay, fine. Let's for an example, this is hypothetical and just an example, let's say sales executive, right? And you feel that there is nothing actually under the sales executive designation you have held is relevant to your CIMA membership and does not come under basic and supplementary. So you can just leave this bit blank. You don't need to worry about it. Then when we look at this, we know, okay, you have this particular work experience, but none of the experience that you have gained as a sales executive is relevant to the CIMA membership application. Okay, so that is how you fill up the employment summary. So like you see, if you fill this up, you know, all right, you have 5 designations and you have already broken it down. All these 5 designations you have already broken down to basic and supplementary, which will support you in writing the detailed experience record. Okay, so I'll touch upon that in my next slide, how you can fill up your detailed experience record. So this is the first document done, and you'll take at least about an hour or so to complete this if you have all the details in hand. So it's quite straightforward. You just need to ensure that you break down the total work experience under basic and supplementary. You need to be a bit mindful in that. And also when you are tallying the total number of months and the basic and supplementary, the total of basic and supplementary, you need to be a bit mindful on that. Okay, and also for an example, let's say that during your employment you took a break, right? You took a break for your studies, or you took a break for traveling, or any personal matter. So what you can do is you can mention the dates here and just mention why you took a break, right? You can say traveling, or you can say studies, or you just took a break from studies, something like that. Because you can't leave gaps in terms of dates on the employment summary, right? So you need to be a bit mindful, complete the date. Also, you just need to mention any gaps between your employment. Just mention the reasons why you took a break, or why there is a gap in between your employment, right? So those are the main areas that would come under employment summary. And then let's move on to the next section. So then employment summary done, you have a basic structure of your documents or your designations that you have held. So you have a basic structure, you keep it aside, then you get on with your application form, right? So I will share, I will show you the application form as well, so that anyone who has not seen the application form can get a better understanding of how it looks like. Okay, so this is how a application form looks. So if you can remember, the application form will have your personal details, your verified details, and your current employment. Your personal details, your name, your surname, birth, your contact ID, and all of that. So your personal details will go on the first page. Quite straightforward, nothing complicated. only your personal details will go on this section of the employment the application form. Then you move on to, let me increase the size of it. Okay, then you move on to a couple of dates that you have to mention, right? So here we ask you to mention the day that you completed your exam. So if you are already an exam complete, you can mention the day that you sat for your strategic level case study exam, right? And then so I'll like I said, like I touched upon on my first slide, so there are two categories of students who will be eligible to apply for their membership. So for the first category is the exam complete students who have completed all the exams. The second category is the students who are yet to sit for your strategic level case study exam, right? So I will first take the students who have completed all the exams, right? For students who have completed all the exams, including the strategic level case study exam, the first section and the third section is applicable for you, right? So the first section, we want you to mention the day that you completed your CIMA exams. And the third section is, we would want you to mention the day that you completed your full-time education. So the full-time education is what we mean by full-time education is the day prior to you starting your first job. So that is the day that you become a part-time student, right? So a part-time student is a student who does their studies along with their work, in the sense while working they do their studies, right? So the day that you completed full-time education is the day that you stopped being a full-time student and become a part-time student. So the day prior to you starting your first job is the day that you have to mention here. So that is for the exam completed students. Then we move on to the students who are yet to sit for their strategic level case study exam, right? So the students who are yet to sit for the strategic level case study exam, you need to mention the day that you are planning to sit for the exam here. Or for example, let's say that you have already sat for your SCS exam in February. And hypothetically, let's say that you have still not got your results. Then you can mention the day that you sat for your exams in February. And let's say that you're sitting for your exams in May. You have booked your exam, you're planning to sit for the SCS exam, then you can mention the date here. And then the same thing is applicable for you also, the day that you completed your full-time education, right? So you need to be a bit mindful when completing this section of the application form. You need to mention the dates clearly and accurately as well, okay? Then we move on to the declaration part. You need to kind of read this paragraph, because this says that you are being subject to a disciplinary action by your employer. So if you tick this box, which means you are being subject to a disciplinary action by your employer, and then you need to provide evidence, and employers need to provide evidence on that as well. So if you tick this, you need to provide evidence. So if you have not been subject to any disciplinary action by any of your employers, you need to read this paragraph carefully and then just untick this box, okay? And then your signature, your physical signature is required, and the day that you're submitting your document, right? So the first page is done, which is your personal details. Then we move on to the verifiers, right? So we have two verifiers you need to provide signatures of. We usually call them proposer or the verifier 1, and then the second, the verifier 2, right? So proposer, if I explain who a proposer is a verifier that you have worked under the longest, right? So a proposer is someone who has seen you work and is one of your line managers, and the proposer or the verifier 1 is someone you have worked with the longest period of time, right? And the seconder is someone who can second the verifier 1, or from another company. So the basic requirement, I'll explain the basic requirement. So you need to get out of your total work experience, you need to get 36 months out of your total work experience verified by 2 verifiers. Let's say, for an example, you have 60 months of work experience and in 5 different companies. So you don't need to go to all those 5 different companies in order to get your work experience verified. What you need to do is you just need to figure out covering 36 months of work experience out of the 60 months, and also that 36 months should include 18 months of core, right? So this is where your employment summary comes in handy, right? So now if you have your employment summary ready, you know which verifiers that you can go to in order to get your 36 months verified, because it clearly shows which company you have completed how many months and how many months of co-experience in different companies you need to collect in order to get your verifiers to sign off, right? So that is where your employment summary comes in hand, so that it is easier for you to figure out your verifiers, right? So the basic requirement is you need to get 36 months verified, which should include 18 months of core as well, right? So for an example, I'll just give you a couple of examples. So for an example, you have been working for the same company for, let's say, 5 years, right? So you can get 2 verifiers from this company to sign off your work experience. Not a problem, right? It's quite straightforward. Let's say that you have worked for 3 companies. First company, let's say you have worked for 12 months. The second company, you have worked only for let's say 20 months. And then the third company, let's say that you have worked for another 20 months, right? So this is hypothetical. 12 months in the first company, 10 months in the second company, and 20 months in the third company, right? So if you calculate the total work experience, you have 46 months of work experience in total, right? In a situation like that, you need to reach out to all 3 employers in order to get your experience signed off, because the minimum requirement is you need to cover 36 months, right? So you need to reach out to all 3 employers in order to get your work experience verified, right? So that is how it works. 36 months of total work experience verified, which should include 18 months of core. If you have your employment summary ready, it will give you an idea of which companies you need to reach out to in order to get your verifiers, or else your work experience signed off by your verifiers. Okay. And then the third example, let's say that you have worked for, 5 different companies, all 5 different companies you have worked for, say, let's say 25 months each. And the last company you have worked for, let's say 40 or 45 months, then again you can go ahead of getting verifications from the last company itself, because the minimum requirement is you need to get 36 months verified, which should include 18 months of core. But if you feel that no, I need to get at least 2 companies signed off, you would prefer to have 2 verifiers from 2 different companies signing off your work experience, there is no restriction. You can most definitely go ahead and have as many verifiers as you like. So what you need to do is you just need to add another second page, right? You can copy this blank page, add another second page, and get more verifiers. If you prefer to have more verifiers, you can feel free to do so. There is no restriction of getting only 2 verifiers. If you feel you need to get more verifiers signing off your membership application, you can most certainly do so, right? So if I just run through the details that are required, it's just the proposer, the name of the proposer, the qualifications. If they're CIMA members, you can just mention their CIMA contact IDs. And sometimes students think that verifiers should be CIMA qualified. It is not like that. There is no requirement like that. The requirement is verifiers have to have seen new work. That is the the requirement. The basic requirement is they have to have seen you work, right? And they have to have hands-on experience on the work that you have carried out for the company, right? So that is the only requirement. They need not be CIMA qualified people. There is no restriction as such, right? But if it happens to be a CIMA member who is your line manager, you can mention their contact ID here. There is no restriction in that also. Okay, and then you need to clearly mention the dates that they are verifying. So this is where we calculate whether you have the minimum 36 months of verifications covered, which should include 18 months of school. So whatever or whoever the verifier you are taking signatures from, clearly mention the date or the time period that they are signing off your work experience. So that is quite important, because this is the area that we calculate that you have the minimum requirement of 36 months verified. Okay, and they can sign, and then they can date or put the date and sign off the verifier sheet. That is applicable for the verifier too as well. Okay, I'm sure that you would have more questions in this area, because a lot of students do have questions on this, the verifier area. So we just drop a text onto the chat box. We will take up your questions, no problem at all. I will just quickly run through the application form so that I give more time to Mr. Tilakavardhana to run through his briefing and also to take up your questions. So I'll quickly run through the application forms. Then the last section of the application form is the current employment details. This is a must, right? Sometimes students think we have already mentioned in the employment summary, and we have got the verifiers of my current employer to sign off. So I don't need to fill the current employment details. It's not like that. You need to mention your current employment details as well. Okay. Then there's a small checklist to ensure you have got all the details ready for submission. So this is the last part. This checklist also needs to be filled. So you can read this bit up, and then you can tick these boxes according to whatever you have completed, right? So this is done. So like you say, it's quite straightforward. The application form is quite straightforward. You just need to figure out who the verifiers are going to be, which the employment summary will help you with, right? The basic requirement is you need to get 36 months covered or 36 months verified along with 18 months of co, right? So that is the basic requirement. It's quite straightforward. If you allocate about 2 or 3 hours for this, it's quite straightforward document. So within half a day, you are done with your employment summary and the membership application form, right? So those two are quite straightforward documents, which you can complete within half a day, right? So two main documents, we are ready with 2 main documents. Then we move on to the most important area, which is the detailed experience record, right? So like I said, this is one of the main documents, or one of the most important documents that you have in your application form, that you need some time to complete and focus on, right? So let's move on to the detailed experience record. So for the detailed experience record, there is no a form or a particular document. So it basically can be a Word document, but there are some guidelines that you need to follow in terms of completing your detailed experience record, which I will show you now. Okay. So this is basically, this also you can download from the website. So basically what we look at is, when it comes to the detailed experience record, we would want you to give a structure. So for each designation, you need to mention all this separately, right? So let's say, for an example, let's take 3 designations in 3 different companies, right? So you take the first designation. In my employment summary, I had the example of a finance executive under XYZ company, right? So what you need to do is take a Word document. You mention the name of the employer, XYZ company, right? And then you mention your job title on the top. So the job title is finance executive, right? You mention the period, the time period of employment, right? You don't need to actually mention who you reported to. We can figure that out on the employment summary, right? Then what you need to do is you need to give a brief description of the organization, right? Maybe about couple of lines, not like a full page, but couple of lines. You just give a brief description of the organization that you have worked for, right? And then you move on to explaining what you have done in terms of your work experience. So let's take XYZ company, right? So again, this is where your employment summary comes in handy. So if you take XYZ company, and if you look at the employment summary, you know how many months of work experience you have categorized under basic, core, and supplementary, right? So what you need to do is, I will not go through this document. I will show you a sample document so that it will be easier for you to understand what we look at when it comes to a write-up. Okay, just give me a second. Okay, here we go. Right, so this is basically what we look at in terms of your detailed experience record, right? So like I said, you can mention your name, your contact ID. It is not a must, but we would want you to mention your job title, your company, and your duration. You just don't need to mention who you reported to. You give a small description about the organization of where you have worked. For an example, XYZ, just few lines, you give a brief description. Then you move on to explaining the work experience that you have carried out. What you can do is you can take the employment summary. So you have put the initial details. Then what you do is you have headings called basic, core, and supplementary, right? So when it comes to basic, then you need to figure out under basic what you have done under basic experience. This is where the document I initially explained to you about comes in handy to you, right? So that document will have the details of basic experience and the subcategories of the basic experience. After this, I'll show you that document. But first of all, let me finish off the detailed experience record. So what we need you to do is we need you to have main headings as basic, core, and supplementary, right? So here they have not given experience for supplementary. So basic, core, and supplementary comes as main headings. Then as subheadings, need you to have separate subheadings. Like under basic, you have preparing and maintaining accounting records. This I showed you on the PPT as well, right? So preparing and maintaining accounting records. Then what you do is you give a brief introduction of what you have done under preparing and maintaining accounting records, right? So you need to avoid bullet points. You need to avoid very brief explanations, because we need to see exactly what you have carried out in terms of preparing and maintaining accounting records. So you need to actually explain in detail what you have done or the activities that you have carried out under preparing and maintaining accounting records, right? So likewise, under basic experience, when I show you that other document, you'll be able to understand there are so many subcategories. So you can pick and choose whatever you have done for each of your designations, right? So likewise, so for basic, what you need to do is basic preparing and maintaining accounting records, statutory and regulatory reporting, IT desktop skills, and things like that. So if you feel that there are certain things that you have not done, you can leave it out. There is no requirement that you need to fill up everything or explain about all the subcategories of work experience, right? So the first designation is done. If you feel there's co-experience and supplementary experience as well, you can follow the similar structure. Have the co-experience as a heading, then as subheadings, you have preparation of management accounts, project management, and so on and so forth. So you can explain under each subcategory the work experience that you have gained for each designation, right? So likewise, this is how you have to start writing your entire detailed experience record. So whatever the designations that you are claiming for your ACMA application, you need to write the detailed experience record, right? And it has to be in the same sequence as your employment summary, on the chronological order, which means from the first to date designations, right? In the employment summary, I told you that if you are not claiming any designation, you just have to fill in the details, but leave the basic co and supplementary part of it blank, right? So if you feel that certain designations are not relevant to your application, you can fill it in the application employment summary. But when it comes to the detailed experience record, what you can do is you can just give this bit of information, right? You just give the title and the duration and all of that, and a brief description about the organization, right? And you don't need to break down that designation under basic co and supplementary, because it is not relevant under basic co and supplementary, right? But you need to mention this bit of details, the job title, the company duration, and a brief description about the organization, right? And then now I will show you the document which I have been referring to from the beginning of the presentation. This will help you to get a better understanding of the subcategories. Okay, here we go. So I think some of you would have already seen this. This is available on the CIMA website if you want to read this through. Take a few minutes to read it through, because it will give you like a basic understanding of exactly what this application or the membership application is all about. And if you move on to this page, right, if you move on to the 4th page, it will give you the main categories, basic and supplementary. Under those, the subcategories as well, right? Under the subcategories, we also have further elaborated on what we consider as preparing and maintaining accounting records, right? So under preparing and maintaining records, accounting records, you have updating the organization ledgers, maintaining payroll procedures, preparation and review of a trial balance, and things like that, right? So if you read this document, you'll be able to understand under basic experience, under preparing and maintaining accounting records, what areas are considered for each category, right? This will help you figure out how you're going to divide your work experience or the total months under basic co and supplementary, right? So this is again an important document that you can read through in order to have a little bit of guidance on the basic co and supplementary, right? I'm not touching a lot on the basic co and supplementary because senior assessor will explain that bit also. So I have not touched upon that bit a lot, but just download this document, which is available on the website, and then you'll be able to get a better understanding of the categories and also the subcategories, right? So detailed experience record is, like I said, again, I'm repeating the same thing. It is quite important, and you need to spend a lot of time on getting that right. So if you have time, maybe about 2 or 3 days, you need to spend on the detailed experience record, because that is the document that will give us the idea of their work experience that you have covered, right? So the first two documents you can complete within half a day, quite straightforward because you have all the information. The detailed experience record, you need to take a little bit of time because you need to refer certain documents. You need to figure out how you're going to divide each of your designations under basic and supplementary. So that bit you need to figure out. So that will take at least about 2 or 3 days. And then we move on to the last section, which is the record of skill development, which is again quite straightforward. It is again a form that you can fill up. Just give me a minute, I'll share that as well. Okay, this is again a form, right? It is quite straightforward again. What we require you to do is we require you to give a few examples of how you have developed your personal skills, interpersonal skills, and organizational skills while you are working, right? So basically, if you scroll through to the bottom of the page, we have given some examples as well. So you just have to read the example, figure out a couple of examples, maybe about 2 or maximum 3 examples of how you have developed each skill, and give us some examples on this given area, this given blank area you can mention. You don't need to go beyond this. So if you feel one example will complete this entire document, you just can select one, but we would prefer you to have at least about 1 or 2 examples to be given to showcase how you have developed these skills, right? So you don't have to go beyond this area that is given, but you can just give us at least about 1 or 2 examples of how you have developed the skills, personal, interpersonal, and then again, the organizational skills. So don't worry, the examples are on the bottom of the page. So you can just read through and then figure out what examples you're going to give, right? So then we are done with the 4 documents. 3 documents are quite straightforward because you have a structure, you have a form. It's quite straightforward. If you refer this recording later on, you'll have some guidance. So 3 documents you can easily fill up, but the detailed experience record, you need to spend a little bit of time. Just keep in mind the sequence, because the employment summary will give you a structure. So if you can fill up the employment summary first, it will really help you with the detailed experience record and also the application form in terms of getting your verifiers. So fill up the employment summary, then the application form, which is again quite straightforward. Then you move on to the detailed experience record, spend a little bit time on that and explain as much as you can, because we need to see what you have done, what you have gained. So always ensure that you take some time, explain what you have done. It's not about what the team has done. So please be mindful of explaining about yourself and your experience, right? Because sometimes students tend to explain about the team's involvement, the team effort, and all of that. So we don't need to see that. We just need to see what you have done and what you have gained in terms of experience. So take a little bit of time and then start writing up your detailed experience record, and then move on to the record of skill development, right? The next slide is on our next assessments, right? So this is applicable for Sri Lankan students only. So the Sri Lankan students will have their next face-to-face assessments on the 1st and 2nd of April. And for that, you need to submit all your documents by the 25th of March, right? We will communicate all this via an email. But for the students in the other regions, if you need to get more information about the next face-to-face assessment or anything about assessments or your application, and also um, getting your hands on this recording, you need to reach out to your respective CIMA team in your country. So they'll be able to help you out, right? They're aware of this workshop as well. The recording will be shared with them. So what you need to do is you just need to reach out to your CIMA team in your respective countries, right? So this slide is applicable for the Sri Lankan students. So then we move on to the questions, but before we move on to the questions, I see there are a lot of questions on the chat box, which we will start replying. I would like to hand over the workshop to Mr. Tilakavardhana, again, who will be touching upon the work experience, the detailed experience record, what the assessors are looking for at the moment, and also what usually they look at in terms of basic core and supplementary. Sir, I'll hand over the session to you.
Thank you, Surangani. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are.
Okay. Thank you, Surangani, for very comprehensive, very well structured presentation. I think you made my job very easy by doing that. Can we go into the fourth slide of your presentation? I would like to have it on screen. Right. So let me start with the assessment process. In these face-to-face assessments, we have two assessors assessing each and every candidate. We call them assessor 1 and 2. The assessor 1 is the desk assessor we call, and the assessor number 2 will be the face-to-face assessor. In most of the instances, I have acted as the assessor number 2, the face-to-face assessor. So I would like to share my experience with you all as far as what we are really trying to assess or to get to know about you. Number one, face-to-face assessments. In the early days or before COVID-19, we had physical face-to-face meetings, and nowadays we are online. But whatever the method we used, I believe, this is my personal opinion, your appearance matters. You should look professional. So in most of the cases, or almost every case, even on online, I ask the candidate to switch on the camera because that makes things easy for me to continue the dialogue with the candidate. So in that case, it is always advisable to look professional because we are trying to offer you a membership of a professional association. So you should look the professional. So professional attire is preferred even in physical face-to-face or online face-to-face assessment. This is my personal view. I believe most of the assessors also have the same view on this point. Then on assessments, we have, as I said before, two assessors, the desk assessor and the face-to-face assessor. All the assessors or the two assessors get your application couple of days in advance. So we do have a time to go through your application and come to certain understanding about your experience before I do the face-to-face interview. In our context, what generally happens is the assessor number 1, who is the desk assessor, goes through application in advance and requests assessor number 2 for certain clarifications if what you have said in your application or what you have written in the application is not very clear. Therefore, it is always advised or advisable in your face-to-face interview to clarify the questions raised by the assessor very carefully. Because these questions are not only from assess number 2, there could be questions asked by assess number 1 as well. Because in our context, even mostly in Sri Lankan context, the two assessors discuss it about application before they come to a final conclusion. Therefore, when you write your application detailed experience record, make sure you write it very clearly and don't use abbreviations or shortened forms which are industry specific. Sometimes assessor may not be from your industry. He or she may not understand certain shortened forms or industry terminology specific you use, right? So when you explain your working experience, make sure you minimize abbreviations or shortened forms used. Because always keep in mind, the desk assessor does not have a chance to talk to you and clarify his doubts. But as far as the face-to-face assessor has a chance of doing so. Therefore, finally, the opinion of both assessors matters. If there is a dispute between the two assessors, it will go to a third person for arbitration. Therefore, it's a time-consuming exercise thereafter. Therefore, when you write your detailed experience, make sure you try to write very clear. You can use general accounting terminology, CIMA terminology, there is no issue. But if you are writing anything industry specific, it better be little descriptive, right? Those are the overall comments I have made. Then we'll go into practical experience requirements. Now we have basic, core, and supplementary experience requirement listed out by CIMA. The basic start with preparing and maintaining accounting records. This includes the basic accounting work you start practicing in your job, like entering vouchers, journal entries, working in a ERP, those things, those work counts as basic experience. Then statutory and regulatory reporting. Sometimes as an accounting professional, you are supposed to create certain reports, certain form filing done for regulatory requirements. So that covers that area. Then IT desktop skills are basically the new generation of accountants are quite good at this because you all have worked in accounting software or on ERP. So that area, I think everyone is quite conversant. Then systems and procedure development. So in your working environment, sometimes the functions under you may need certain developments, maybe a new systems introduction or procedures developed. Even it could be for certain certification you do develop procedures. But all in all, these things are considered as basic. The most important is the co-experience category, where we look for minimum of 18 months. In her presentation, Surangani very correctly said, if you want 18 months of experience, claim for more than 18. This is more than 18 because there is always a chance the assessor will not agree with all what you claim. Right? If you just go with 18 months on certain aspects, assessor might think what you claim as co-experience is not exactly. co-experience as per CIMA definition. Therefore, it is always advisable, as Surangani said, to have little more than 18 months. This happens especially when you are working for a accounting firm or an audit firm. Sometimes your accounting work is more towards financial accounting rather than management accounting. Therefore, it is always advisable to claim more than 18 months to ensure that you give the assessor a benefit of reducing certain months from what you have claimed. I have seen this happening in many instances because most of the assessors or every assessor is a very senior accounting person who has gone through this mill before you. So they know exactly, most of the people, most of the assessors have worked in audit firms or accounting firms, and most of them have worked in manufacturing, services, and all these industries. And they have worked in more than one industry in many cases. So they have a good idea of exactly what kind of work being performed by our candidates in these different industries. Therefore, always it's safe to have more than 18 months of co-experience. So let's look at what are these co-experience requirements are. Preparation of management accounts. So that means the set of accounts you prepare at the end of the month or end of 6 months or whatever for the purpose of top management, right? There can be certain differences from pure financial accounts to this management account. These management accounts are being prepared to provide certain important information what the management required to know, basically to cover the management requirements. Therefore, your experience in preparing those is very important because you apply most of the things you have learned during your course of CIMA study. Therefore, preparation of management accounts on management formats, it's a very important area as far as co-experience is concerned. Then planning, budgeting, and forecasting. This is the area where CIMA accountants are experts on planning, budgeting, and forecasting. I need not to tell you in detail about this kind of experience because you all would have already experienced how important these functions are. Planning. It can be short-term planning, it can be annual planning, it can be strategic planning or whatever. Then budgeting and forecasting, right? Because with all that, then you come into the variance analysis and other forecasting methodologies and stuff like that. Those are considered as very important key experiences of an CIMA accountant. Then management reporting for decision making. This is also very key area because assessor will always try to see whether this particular candidate has done certain amount of reporting which has helped the top management to make decisions. So it's decision support systems, your involvement in decision support systems, the variance analysis or any other analysis, break-even analysis, right, time series analysis or whatever you do to help the top management to make decisions. So we always look for this content in your co-experience. Then product and service costing. You may be in the manufacturing industry or service industry. Whatever it is, your product and service costing is an important aspect. We have learned process costing and other methods of costing, standard costing. So all these things has to come into play when you do this product and service costing. So explaining your experience in this area is also very important because it is again a area of experience what we look for. Then comes the information management information, right? It can be software driven or it can be manually prepared. Whatever the form you do it, what kind of management information is produced by you is important. That also connected with the decision support information provision. Then project tax appraisal, that is NPV, IRR, time value of money, all these kinds of theories what we learn in CIMA being applied. So if you have advised your management on new projects, if you have done appraisals on new projects, your recommendation has been implemented, that carries long weight. That carries high weight in your experience record. Then the project management, if you have managed certain projects on your own, if you are given the leadership to manage projects, if you have done all the resource management, timing, and other calculations of project management, that is also considered as a core area of experience. Then comes working capital control, how you have managed your stocks, inventory, and working capital cycle management, debtors management, all this cash flow forecasting and management, all these things are considered as core area of experience. So if you have similar experience, if you have already done it, make sure you mention it, explain it properly in your detailed experience record, because as I said before, explaining it properly is very important because there is a desk assessment. Who does not talk to you, who does not meet you either online or physically to ask questions. So when you describe, when you write your experiences, be more careful. There should be clarity and there should be proper explanation. But it need not to be lengthy explanations, as Rangani said, brief but clear and concise. Its explanations are very important. Then risk management and business assurance. This is the auditing part, risk management part. If you have maintained risk matrices, if you have done risk assessments, and if you have done assurance part, internal audit kind of work, control aspects of all the financial function, that will be another area of experience. You got to explain all these things. Then comes to the supplementary. This is where we gain certain knowledge about your maturity, about financial strategy, how you have involved in formalizing or implementing the financial strategy of your organization. What kind of inputs you have given to the top management? What kind of involvement you had in this corporate finance? Have you negotiated with your banks to get better facilities for your organization? What kind of financial models you have developed? What kind of financial assistance, corporate finance assistance you have given to your higher ups or your supervisors to make certain decisions for your organization? And treasury management also likewise, like that, like how you have negotiated better rates for your organization, how you have negotiated with banks to get beneficial terms for the organization. Those things are important aspects for us to decide or to assess your maturity in the field of finance. Then the taxation, your knowledge on taxation, tax planning, what kind of tax planning and handling you have done. If you have experience in tax, that will be a supplementary experience, which will be like, icing on the cake. All these supplementary experiences are very valuable because that shows the depth of your experience. Or shows, you have done the exactly what is needed to be done as an accountant, as an CIMA member. Supplementary will tell us how much of maturity you have gained, business evaluation and appraisal, how you had done the value addition to your organization, how you have added more value to your output. Then business strategy, external relationships, all these things show us. Now, for example, if you have done any presentations to your higher ups, management team, or the board of directors, that shows the assessor your level of maturity, your acceptance in the organization. All these things are important to make a fair assessment of your experience. Therefore, all three categories of experience is important, but we pay more attention to the core because that is the area we have to ensure each and every candidate is very thoroughly. That's why we are looking for minimum of 18. That's the 50% of the total requirement of experience in these core areas. Supplementary experience is always the icing on the cake that will make your experience very nice and attractive. So basically, this is what we are looking at as assessors. And when it comes to the face-to-face interview, when you are given opportunity, because generally these interviews span between 30 to 45 minutes. When you are given an opportunity to explain, make sure that you touch upon the co-experience and the supplementary, because it's kind of a presumption that you have done your basics when you have done your core better. Right? Therefore, during this time of the interview, when you are given an opportunity, explain the core and supplementary experience more than the basic, because that is what the assessor wants to hear. And in certain instances, I have met candidates who give very short answers, not very descriptive. So then we have to prompt. We'll have to keep on asking the same question to get at exactly what we want to know. So therefore, make sure during this 30 or 45 minutes given to you, you take the maximum out of it. Explain all the core and supplement areas of experience you have gathered during your career is summarized and explained to the assessor. Assessor will always try to give you an opportunity because assessors are generally willing to listen. That's what happens. So we give you an opportunity to disclose and describe how you have gained experience and what kind of experience you have. So use that opportunity and ensure that you touch upon co-experience the most. That is the area every assessor wants to make sure that you have done the minimum, you have met the minimum required. As I said before, in the interview, the face-to-face assessor may ask certain questions for clarifications required by desk assessor also. So then what happens is once we have the clarification, we communicate it to the desk assessor saying, yes, this question was asked from this candidate and we received a satisfactory answer. And I recommend that area of experience is fulfilled. So that is how it happens. So as far as the candidates are concerned, make sure you try to explain your experience properly and ensure that assessor understands it the way you want. That helps the assessor to make a fair judgment about your experience. I think these are the basic things what I want to touch upon. Surangani, do we have any questions or anything to be answered?
Mr. Tilakwarna, there are two questions that we want to pose. There was 1 minute. One of it came from a gentleman, I believe, called Lin. He says that during the audit planning, we will understand the entity and assess their business risk, fraud risk, as well as the risk of financial statement. I'm not too sure what the rest of the question is, but
I think that gentleman must be working for an audit firm. Okay. Yes, audit planning, budgeting done for audits, and budgeting work of clients, what you check and certify, are considered as co-experience in the most of the instances. Even you plan for your audit team, your expenses planning, all these things are considered if you have done substantial work on those areas.
Okay, and the second question is from Amiranti. She's currently a company secretary, and also she has about 4 years in internal audit and fraud. So what she wants to know is whether it is relevant to the application that we're talking about.
Company secretarial practices, certain areas, yes, is relevant because certain regulatory reporting and things like that and external relationships we are talking about cover this company secretarial work covers those areas. Internal auditing, of course, yes, risk management and business assurance, certain aspects are being covered by internal audit. But what is important is you have experience in other areas of management accounting as well, because our core competency is management accounting. So in this core area of experience requirement, we pay more attention to management accounting related activities. Therefore, internal auditing, yes, definitely certain aspect of internal auditing can be taken in. Company secretarial practices, yes, certain aspect of that can be taken in. But on the same time, we look for relevant management accounting experience as well.
Okay, and also like in terms of the application, there was a question that was raised. If an applicant, does an applicant have to also have more into basic and supplementary, or do they need to focus more on core?
Core is the basic requirement. Okay. That's why we called it as a core requirement. So that is a must. That minimum of 18 months of core experience.
Do they need to cover all of the subcategories, or?
No need, because sometimes it's very difficult to cover all the areas. I very rarely see candidates who has experience in all these what we have listed. But 18 months of reasonable spread is accepted.
Okay.
Even for supplementary, the same. Because I don't think when you work for 4 or 5 years, you can cover all the areas of core and supplementary. It's a very difficult thing. But what we are looking for is reasonable achievement and reasonable level of maturity as far as the candidate is concerned.
Could you also maybe run through just like a brief idea. I know you ran through the in terms of the both two assessors and all of that, but in terms of the applicant, like what can they expect at a face-to-face assessment? Like just maybe a small brief on that.
Yeah, Nikita. There's another area I want to touch upon. Can we go into the slide, the employment history sheet, which Surangani explained how to fill it? Do we have that slide?
Yeah, she's going through it. Just 1 minute.
Right, thanks. When you fill this, when you start your career, at the initial stages, you may start as a trainee or apprenticeship, right, or intern. So during that period, it is not logical to claim more core experience and less of basic. This is a mistake we see most of the time. So when you are a trainee, when you are an intern, your experience become more basic and less of core. Sometimes we see candidates claim around 6 months of basic and 12 months of core, right, during 1.5 years of internship or uh, apprenticeship training, which is from assessor's point of view is not logical, because during your initial years, initial months, you gather more of basic experience than core. So, but when you progress in your career, when you become an executive or a manager, definitely your experience become more of core and less of basic. You tend to get more of core and supplementary than basic. So that is the normal assumption all the assessors make when they look at this uh, career profile. So therefore, don't make that mistake, because I think it's not logical as well to claim more co-experience at your very first employment, where you are a trainee or an apprenticeship trainee or an intern or whatever. When you start your career at the initial stages, claiming, claiming more of co-experience and less of basic is not logical. That's the important point I want to make here. So when you uh, claim your employment uh, months, so make sure it is in a logical pattern, because otherwise the assessor will have a question how this person gained more experience being a trainee. Right. Anything else, Nikita?
Oh, and in terms of the employment summary,
Yeah.
most people had this question is that do they need to record everything starting with their first job to now, or whether they need to include or just the relevant experience?
As Surangani said, you can list everything, but you can mention the months only on the areas where you are claiming. I have come across certain candidates who have worked for 10, 15 years. They claim only 5 years or 6 years experience out of 15 to get the membership. They may be keeping the balance for their higher levels of membership. I have seen this happening, but if it is relevant, of course, accepted, because sometimes if you work while you are studying, you gather more number of years of experience by the time you finish your study. So therefore, when you come across a situation of that nature, if you need around 18 months of core, so you can make sure that you claim only certain employment to get the membership. But you mention everything, but you don't claim the months. You keep it for maybe higher membership status. That is possible. I have seen this done by certain candidates.
And also, like what we generally tell the applicant is that to include everything starting with their first job to the current job.
Yes.
And then now sometimes, now there was another question. So now, for instance, they have worked for two different organizations. It's the same designation. It's the same thing that they do, but they still have to mention it.
Yeah,
Because,
that's fine. That is
yeah,
fine.
yeah.
That is perfect. Because you can be accounts executive in one organization, the next organization also you could be accounts
Same thing.
executive. That is fine.
Yeah.
That is fine.
And then they have to, so basically, when they're doing the employment summary, they need to mention all of the employment, whether it be the same, if it's from two different organizations. Plus, when they're doing the detailed report, they need to write the experience broken into core basic and certificate.
Yes, because two organizations could be in different industries.
Yeah.
Therefore, the experience could be totally different, although your designation is the same. So it helps the assessor to understand the spread of the experience, or the how much of different types of experience the candidate has gathered. So it's important. Maybe the same designation you have, but it is important you mention all separately, organization by organization, because it could be different industries as well.
Yeah, so it will be more, what can I say, it will be more beneficial for the applicant to put down all the information as well, as well as on the employment summary, as well as the detailed report, so that the assessor understands their scope, right? Their scope of experience.
Exactly, Nikita, because the more you provide, it makes our job easier, and it makes us understand your experience proper. So therefore, more the merrier. If you can explain your experience, that helps. As I said before, the desk assessor only reads what is written. So that person does not have an opportunity to talk to the candidate. So both assessors' opinion matters when it comes for the final decision on the membership. Therefore, it's very important not only what you describe or what you talk with the face-to-face assessor, but also what you write in your document, which goes to the desk assessor.
So another question that was asked in terms of the application is that this lady is currently unemployed. So she wants to know if that is an issue for her to apply, but she says she has previous experience. So is that?
Unemployment is not an issue. You can take a break in your career. Even I think Surangani mentioned, if you may take a break to travel or for your studies, having a break is not an issue. But if you have relevant experience previously, that counts. There is absolutely no issue of applying for membership. If you have the minimum requirement of 18 months of core and supplementary and the basic experience, but 36 months, as Surangani explained, if you have around 40 or 40 plus months, that will be much better. So currently unemployed is not an issue at all, because you may be taking a break. That we understand. That's perfectly okay.
Okay. And the next question is, can they take the verification of management accounts and KPIs as an internal auditor as co-experience?
Yes, up to a certain extent, yes. If they have done the evaluation, the assessments, KPI monitoring, yes, those things can be considered as co-experience. That all depends on how you present it and how you explain it. Because like on the face of internal audit, which may not, but if you explain properly what you have done, if you have really gone into details, if you have set the KPIs, if you have monitored the KPIs, if you have checked the KPIs achievements, and if you have done management reporting on those and help for certain decision making, of course, we consider it as an important experience.
Let's see if we have any more questions. Can you explain the difference between the postal as well as the face-to-face assessments?
Yes.
And benefits and drawbacks?
Yeah, face to face, of course, you have an opportunity of explaining yourself, and it's a two-way communication all the time. Because though there is one assessor who's a desk assessor, the second one is face to face, because you have a golden opportunity of explaining verbally what you have done and what you have achieved. In the postal system, what happens is when you mail your application, it goes into the system and assessed by two assessors who can be anywhere in the world, who may not have exact experience of what you are talking about. So it lot depends on how you explain or how you write your profile for the assessor. But in face-to-face, of course, you have opportunity of understanding assessors require. You know exactly what assessor is looking at, what he's trying to get at, so that you can explain. But in the postal system, no. But there can be certain advantages in postal system because it's all documented and systematic and it goes through a system. So there can be advantages of that nature, but I would say these face-to-face assessments are also really good because candidate is having a very good chance of explaining the experience and directly answering an assessor. That is an advantage, I believe, for a candidate. And even face-to-face may be a faster way of doing it as well sometimes because within few days it happens. But postal system may take could take little longer than the face-to-face decision.
Okay, so there is a question. So if somebody has more than 5 years of experience, can they apply for direct fellowship? Or if you can just maybe explain what that means to them.
There is a direct path, but which is not very clear at the moment. But there are candidates who apply direct fellowship. They are the people who are having around 15-20 years of experience and having very high positions in corporates. And there have been certain instances are invited to apply. And if there is a candidate of that nature, they'll have to discuss with the division, their respective country office and decide whether they can apply direct fellowship. But others, of course, if you have just for 40 months, 50 months, or even 55 months or whatever, his best way is to go through this process and get the associate membership first and then go into the fellowship. Because in CIMA, there is no system of automatic fellowship like in some other institutions.
And to add to that question, generally the person who is going for direct fellowship has to demonstrate either senior, technical,
Yes.
or operational experience.
Definitely.
And overall, you need to have about 72 months. So that's 36 for ACMA and 36 for fellowship.
Yeah.
That is how generally the application works. It's two applications. So one ACMA application and one FCMA application. And then submitted directly to, you can email it to the your country office.
Yes, I think that's right.
Yeah. There is a question from Vijay. He says, what exactly do we need to write if someone is handling core supplementary experience simultaneously? Let's say after 36 months, the person is handling both for 30 months. How do they, I'm assuming they're asking how do they write it separately? Like how do they write core and how do they write supplementary separately?
The basic rule of the game is make sure that you fill 18 months of core, right? First ensure that you have a claim for 18 plus months if you can better of core experience. If you have gained everything parallelly, which is quite normal, what you'll have to ensure is 18 months of core is claimed. Then the balance is for supplementary, whatever you have. The minimum requirement is on the core because we are looking for 18 months of core experience. Supplementary, we don't have a limit as such, but you can basically divide it into two and take the best for core to ensure that you have your minimum requirement and add the balance to the supplementary. I think that would do.
So there is another question. So this person has about 13 years of experience in auditing, accounting, and finance related functions.
Yeah.
So how do they divide that experience?
13 years. Oh, yeah. So out of 13 years, if you can gather 18 months, even out of 5 or 6, 7 years, that would do. The rest you can keep for your higher membership requirements. Auditing, financial services, and all other finance related experience does count. All depends on what kind of audits you have done. If you have done management audits, if you have in the process of working in audit firm, if you have done project appraisal, if you have done feasibility studies, little bit of management consultancy work, all these things can be added to your core experience. So definitely, if you have 13 years of experience, you should be able to gather those things. Project appraisal, budgeting, forecasting, feasibility, financial feasibilities and stuff like that. Definitely could count as core experience.
So if anyone has more questions, you can send it through to us. I think we have about another maybe 15 minutes. Any more tips that you can give an applicant looking at applying for ACMA, either through face-to-face or through poster?
Yeah, so the online system or the postal system is a very well structured system. So you can rely on that and you can apply through that. But in most of the cases, face-to-face interviews, you meet or you at least one of the assessors is a local person. There's a high chance of you being assessed by a local person. So the advantage is the certain things you explain, which are common in local context, are easily understood by the local assessor. So there is a fairly high chance of you meeting a local assessor if you go into the face-to-face system. But in the postal system or the online system, that possibility is very rare. Like I, as a as is like I on the online system or the postal system, most of the time I get candidates from other countries. I don't get candidates coming from Sri Lanka. But in face-to-face, the system, it's most of the time, almost 90% of the time, I do interview and I do talk to candidates coming from Sri Lanka. So therefore, the candidates have an advantage of explaining your experience in local context to a local assistant who has a better chance of, who has a better uh, opportunity or uh, chance of understanding what you are trying to say.
Okay. And then there is a question like, does the 36 months or can the 36 months include part-time as well as full-time experience?
It can, because there is a place to mention whether it's a full-time or part-time. All depends on what you have done and the content and the depth you have gone in. Even a part-time experience can be valuable and considered as core if you have the depth in your experience. So part-time, full-time, you will have to mention. But if there is a doubt in a face-to-face, the assessor will question how you have done the part-time and what kind of involvement you have, how many hours per week or whatever you have worked on the particular uh, designation or the job role. So that has to be explained. Then the assessors will make a fair judgment.
Okay. So all experience, including the current role, whether it be, say, for instance, 3 months since that person joined a new company, they can still use that in that particular experience as well, right?
Yes, it doesn't matter whether you work 3 months, 6 months, or 6 years. If the experience is relevant, substantial, yeah, it counts.
Okay. And also the verification. Now, in terms of the verification, the verifiers now, for instance, when they're signing off, there was a question: can the verifications overlap? Meaning, like, I'm assuming this person is talking about the same organization. So if somebody, there are two people signing off in the same company, can they overlap the timeline that they're signing off on?
Yes, it is possible because you, in your role, may be dual reporting happening. So you may be reporting to one supervisor on one set of work or one kind of work and to another supervisor on another kind of work. So if you have a dual role in your current position, there can be overlap. There can be two supervisors who are certifying it. That is fine. But as Suranjani said, we always look for 18 months certified co-experience. So certification by a supervisor of your work is important because that's the evidence as assessors we have that you have performed that role.
So in the verification section, you, as an assessor, I would assume that you would want the entire page to be full or filled up by the person who is verifying, correct?
Yes, because that's another way of evidence that the verifier is consciously certifying the experience of the candidate. Because sometimes we see the candidate fills and the supervisor only signs. But if you can get the supervisor to fill the form, if he or she is willing to do that or doesn't mind doing that, that will be a great thing, personally as well as on assessment. So if you have really done your part, I think any supervisor would take a couple of minutes to fill the form and help the candidate out.
Okay. And there was a question in terms of, I don't think this applies to CIMA, but this lady had a question. She said she wanted to know if the CA articleship included as work. Is it included as work experience?
We don't go by the articleship of CA, but definitely we are talking about working for accounting firm or audit firm as a requirement under CA guidelines. So that experience can be counted if you fill it according to CIMA requirement. But we don't assess the CA documents in that format. But you'll have to come into the CIMA prescribed format and explain the experience, same experience. If it is relevant, will be considered.
Okay.
Nikita, do we have any other questions?
Yeah, just see if we have any more. So is there so there are two forms that are available as proposer and seconder. Is
Yes.
there a significance in that? Like when somebody is getting verifications, is there a particular order that they need to have? Do they need to have?
Yeah, yes, as Surangani said before, the proposer should be the person for whom you have worked for a longest period of time. We believe that person knows the capabilities, abilities of the candidate the most comparatively. Second, can be also from the same organization to whom the candidate has worked for. Maybe a little senior position even is possible if that person is aware of the work, achievements, and the accomplishments of the candidate. That's fine. But proposer, always it's better if you can get your immediate supervisor. As Surangani said, need not to be a CIMA member. If it is a CIMA member, it's much better because that person knows exactly what is required as the experience to certify. But there is no hard and fast rule. But the supervisor, your immediate supervisor, being the proposer, is much logical than anyone else.
So yeah, like this, I think it's almost the same question. So basically, can the verifiers be the line manager and the line manager's manager? And
yeah, because there is no ceiling or no specific number of verifiers and seconders needed. Minimum is 2. So if you feel that you can add more value to your application by having a senior person certifying and recommending your work, that is fine. And we would like to see that as well. Rather than other than the line manager. If line manager certifies and higher up, maybe a director or a higher CFO or any other person can certify that, that looks very nice and adds value to your application.
so I think there's a lot of questions about the verifications and stuff like that.
Nikita, verification of 18 months is a key.
Yeah. 18 months.
Yeah.
18. So it's basically 18 months. Overall 36 months covered.
Yeah.
And then your current role, generally current role should also be verified.
Exactly,
But it will
exactly.
be different for somebody who is not working currently.
Yeah. So
Um,
last employment
yeah.
would be the best.
Last, yeah. Um, that's about it. In terms of questions, we have about maybe 2 minutes if there are any questions.
I think we are done with the questions because most of the questions were covered by Mr. Tilakvardhana in his briefing and answering the questions. So if there are no questions, we can end the session. So first of all, I would like to thank Mr. Tilakvardhana for joining with us and taking his time off during the weekend to support us with the questions and also helping us out on briefing of how the assessors see the application form and the requirements that the assessors have in terms of the work experience that needs to be submitted. So thank you, sir, for joining us today. And
You are welcome. It's a
thank you, sir.
pleasure, Surangani, and it's our duty to help the next generation of accountants to come up and get the membership and take the profession forward. So I'm really happy and delighted about the opportunity given to me. And I would like to thank CIMA Sri Lanka as well as the membership team for the opportunity given. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. We can always count on you for support as always. And I would want to thank all the students who joined this session today. And I hope we have covered the membership application process, the relevant experience, and how you can submit your documents. And we sincerely do hope that we have cleared all your queries and questions that you have. So I would want to repeat this again. If you have any questions, any support that you need, you can always reach out to the CIMA team in your respective country because they will definitely have the recording. I will be sharing the recording with the team. And then you'll have access to it somewhere from Monday or Tuesday. So reach out to the CIMA team in your country for further support and further clarifications and about the next face-to-face assessment and the deadlines. So while thanking you for joining the session, we have come to the end of the session. So I wish you all the very best in your membership application. And I wish you a good and happy weekend as well. So thank you so much for joining. And we from the CIMA Sri Lanka membership team and Mr. Tilakvardhana, we would want to wish you all the very best in terms of your application.